So many of you asked me to make a video on Lanluma after seeing Claudia's video on Sculptra versus Lanluma. So let's talk about it, and let's talk about your options, because all of you want to know, is Lanluma the new Sculptra, and does Lanluma work better than Sculptra? What's the difference? Is it more effective? Is Lanluma coming to the US? It's important to note that at this time, I am not affiliated with any pharmaceutical company.
I'm not sure if you guys have been watching the Netflix series Painkiller, but it's a really good series about the Sackler family that started Purdue Pharma that's partly responsible for the opioid crisis. And the reason I'm bringing this series up is because it sheds light on the pharmaceutical companies and how they employ practitioners to speak and promote drugs, and cosmetic products like Lanluma and Sculptra are prescribed drugs, and the financial incentives are very lucrative for those providers who speak and train for these pharmaceutical companies.
So I just want to let you know that I'm giving you my non-biased opinion, as I am not associated with any of the pharmaceutical companies that manufacture either Sculptra or Lanluma. So I'm going to speak very candidly on the matter. As some of you may know, I'm a big fan of Sculptra, and the thing that makes Sculptra stand out in the market is that it's a polylactic acid biostimulator as opposed to a calcium hydroxyapatite stimulator that some of you may have heard of, Radiesse. Radiesse is a calcium hydroxyapatite biostimulator, and in my experience, I believe the collagen stimulation you get from a polylactic acid is a lot more than from a calcium hydroxyapatite.
Right now, the major global manufacturers of polylactic acid biostimulators are 4 companies: Galderma with Sculptra, Dermavale with Estafil, Sinclair Pharma with Lanluma, and PRP Science with Alidia. Lanluma is actually a rebrand of a South Korean product called Ganavi. Ganavi was rebranded to Lanluma and launched in the UK in February 2021 by Sinclair Pharmaceuticals. Lanluma has been approved for marketing in 32 countries and regions around the world so far, but unfortunately,
Lanluma is not approved here in the US. We'll talk more about Lanluma coming to the US in a bit.
Sculptra and Lanluma both have the same ingredients: the biostimulator, polylactic acid, and mannitol and carboxymethylcellulose, which both help with the freeze-drying process and the suspension of the product.
So the difference between Sculptra and Lanluma, and why some believe that Lanluma is more effective than Sculptra, lies in the amount of polylactic acid each vial contains. Polylactic acid is the biostimulator agent that causes your skin to produce its own collagen.
In 1 vial of Sculptra, you get 150 milligrams of polylactic acid, and in 1 vial of Lanluma, you get 210 milligrams of polylactic acid. So you're getting more of the biostimulating agent in Lanluma than you are with Sculptra. Interestingly, there was a very recent clinical trial posted a few days ago in which they compared the effectiveness of Sculptra versus Ganavi. Remember, Ganavi is Lanluma. So they did a split-face study to the nasolabial folds or smile lines. So one side of the nasolabial fold was treated with Ganavi, the other side Sculptra. And the outcome of the study showed that Ganavi or Lanluma gave better results on the wrinkle severity rating scale than Sculptra did to this area.
So you're likely going to get more volume and even more of an increase in skin thickness with Lanluma, but is this difference responsible for all of the improvement in Claudia's results? Claudia said she thought 1 vial of Lanluma is equal to 3 vials of Sculptra. I don't think that would be the case based on the 150 milligram Sculptra vial versus the 210 milligram of polylactic acid in a Lanluma vial, which are both intended for the face. I think it may be more like 1 vial of Lanluma may be equal to a vial and a half of Sculptra. I watched Claudia's video on her results after 7 vials of Sculptra, and I was pretty shocked at her lack of results on her still photos. I could definitely see a difference in her video, and she even mentioned that you could see more of a difference in the video versus the still photos. But let me just say that I have never treated someone with 7 vials of Sculptra with such little results, especially on someone like Claudia. When I look at Claudia, I think she's the perfect candidate for Sculptra. She looks like someone who's very lean. She has the face of an athlete with very beautiful defined bone structure, but sometimes the bone structure can become a little too defined. And the reason is because of the loss of skin thickness from aging. And if you're lean, you get a lot of exercise, you can notice this even more, because the less dense your skin tissue, the more bone structure that's going to show underneath. I started noticing these same things on my face, being that I do a good amount of cardio and I'm naturally very lean. So Claudia did 4 vials of Sculptra, and she and her doctor didn't see much difference, and then kept going. I've been doing Sculptra for years, and I've never done 4 vials on someone and not seen much difference in someone that was a facial aging category of a sinker like Claudia, who had the same amount of volume loss that Claudia had. If I had minimal results like she did after 4 vials, I would really need to investigate why that person had such little results, because results in someone like Claudia are usually very apparent, which is why I say Sculptra is great for sinkers and athletes. Now, if you do 4 vials and you're not a sinker and you're not gaunt, or there isn't much to restore because maybe you're younger, let's say you're only 30 or 32, then I can understand you not seeing much difference because your face hasn't aged much, or you're not gaunt. I wouldn't expect to necessarily see a big difference. But for someone like Claudia, it's shocking to hear that she did not only 4 vials, but she went on to do 7 vials of Sculptra without much difference. The thing I don't understand is if you got 4 or even 5 vials of Sculptra with hardly any results, why would you keep going? Sometimes you don't see results from 2 vials and then you go on to do the 3rd or the 4th vial and then you see it. But if I do 4 vials on someone who looks like they're the perfect candidate for Sculptra, I'm going to be investigating why, and I may be skeptical of continuing treatment. Are you on a biologic like Humira, where it may hinder your body's response that's needed to build collagen? Also, it'd be very interesting to know how much volume she was treated with to each area for all of her treatments, because the amount of volume treated to the target areas is really important. Let's say I have someone's temples that are very hollow, and each time I treat them with a 0.5 milliliter, they're not going to see much of a difference. Were these the same areas treated with Lanluma, and how much volume was given each time to each area? Now, if I do 4 vials and I am seeing some improvement, I would continue a treatment. I invite you to look at my Sculptra playlist. I featured many before and afters of real patients who I treated with Sculptra with really good results, and the amount of vials ranged from 1 all the way up until 4.
So I got several comments asking why Lanluma is not being offered here in the US when it's offered in Europe. People are asking, why aren't you offering Lanluma to your patients?
So let's talk about Lanluma from an evidence-based medicine standpoint. I can tell you that here in the US, we have one of the strictest regulatory bodies for drug approvals, our FDA. The cut to the chase way it's been explained to me on how the drug approval system works around the world is a drug will first get approved in the UK, and if the drug doesn't kill anyone, then it goes to Canada. If it doesn't kill anyone there, then it comes to the US.
Obviously, I'm not being literal here, but there's some truth on which countries usually approve drugs first. I'm not sure if you know the thalidomide story, but it was a drug created back in the late 1950s and early 1960s. It was marketed as a safe sedative and anti-anxiety wonder drug, so safe that you could give it to a pregnant woman for morning sickness. It was approved in 45 countries, including Canada. At that time, Dr. Frances Kelsey was the FDA officer put in charge of approving thalidomide in the US, and she thought the pharmaceutical company's evidence provided to her on the drug's safety was a collection of meaningless pseudoscientific jargon rather than science-based evidence. So she denied the drug's approval all 6 times the company resubmitted, lobbying furiously to get their drug approved in the US. Despite that she was under intense pressure to approve the drug, she was even made fun of. They called her an unreasonable nitpicker, even suggesting that she was stupid. 8 months later, evidence showed that thalidomide caused birth defects, and thousands of children were born with deformities like short arms and legs, and sometimes no arms and legs, malformations of the heart, deafness, and blindness. The drug was responsible for miscarriages as well as death shortly after birth. By denying the drug here in the US, she saved thousands of lives and was given a President's Award by John F. Kennedy.
Any drug approved here in the US needs to do their own study of their drug to prove its safety and efficacy before it can be marketed and used here. It seems that Lanluma was able to get approved in the UK because of Sculptra. Because Lanluma has the same ingredients as Sculptra, and Sculptra has been studied and used for several years, and it's been proven safe and effective, Lanluma was able to get approval in the UK based on an equivalent study, basically saying that it's equivalent to Sculptra. It has the same ingredients, so that's how it got approved in the UK. But here in the US, we have to do all of our own studies on any new drug. Now, I'm sure Lanluma is safe because it contains the same ingredients as Sculptra, Sculptra, but I was just bringing up the thalidomide story to answer your question on why Lanluma is not yet approved here in the US. I wanted to give you insight on the strictness of our FDA, which has saved us from the thalidomide national health disaster, but it couldn't save us from the corrupt opioid crisis. I did reach out to Lanluma to ask if they had any intention of bringing it to the US, and this was their response.
Hi, Natural Injector. We don't have a specific date to share yet, but we're working hard to bring Lanluma to the US.
It will probably be a few years or more before Lanluma would be available in the US because a big pharma company would have to pick up the drug and do studies on it here. A lot of times companies partner with each other. For example, Teoxane partnered with Revance to distribute their line of fillers here in the US. In the US, it's known as the RH line of fillers. Either that or the pharmaceutical company that sells Lanluma, Sinclair, would have to do FDA studies here in the US, and that takes years to do studies, and it costs millions of dollars as well. As far as Lanluma lasting 5 years and Sculptra lasting 2 years, there have been no studies to back this up. The only reason that we can say Sculptra lasts only 2 years is because it's limited by the duration of the study, because the study only went out for 2 years. Depending on how many vials you get, I think Sculptra could last longer than 2 years before you go back to complete baseline. If Sculptra and Lanluma have the same ingredients, I don't see why Lanluma would last that much longer than Sculptra. You can watch my 2 videos on how long Sculptra really lasts if you want to know more about the longevity of collagen stimulators, because this is why I love them.
The most exciting thing about Lanluma to me is that they've designed a vial specifically for the butt. They're doing neck also, which is very exciting. This year, it was granted the Best Body Filling Injection Award by the AMWC.
This may be an area where Lanluma has an enormous advantage over Sculptra because it takes a lot of vials to get improvement with Sculptra to the butt, to where it probably just isn't practical, especially if you think you're going to get BBL-like results with Sculptra. Now, cellulite is a completely different story because it doesn't take much product to treat cellulite dimples.
Here is a patient's butt I treated. This was 14 vials because it takes so many vials to get noticeable results because the buttocks are a very large area, the largest muscle in our body. And while she was very happy with her results, they're not BBL results, and this would cost close to $10K.
So if you don't mind spending close to $10K to have modest results, go for it. And if you don't have fat to take from anywhere, which was the case with my patient, she didn't want to have a BBL because of the risk, and there was no fat to take from anywhere. How wonderful it would be if there was a vial with more polylactic acid in it designed for the butt.
Because Lanluma X is designed for the butt, it comes with 630 milligrams of polylactic acid compared to their vial for the face, which is only 210 milligrams. This is where I see it has a major advantage over Sculptra to the butt.
So here are my thoughts on your options. If you live in one of the 32 countries or regions where they offer Lanluma and you're not worried that it's a newer brand of collagen stimulator that hasn't been studied as long as Sculptra has, try it. Especially if you've already tried Sculptra, I always tell patients the only way you're gonna know if you like something more than another product is to try it. That way you can compare it to one another. For example, if you've only been getting Botox and you wanna try out Dysport, the only way you're gonna know if you like Dysport is to try it. Now, if you're really nervous about going down the path of getting a biostimulator because you're worried about the side effects, I would say try Sculptra because it's been studied for years, for several years. Just like if I had somebody afraid to try neuromodulators, I would say try Botox first because it's been out the longest and has been the most studied, as opposed to trying something newer like Daxxify. I think it's exciting, and if we had it here in the US, I would be total game to try it. Now, if you live in the US and you want to go overseas to try Lanluma, I don't know if that makes much sense because I always tell people biostimulators are a journey. They don't work immediately, and you have to go back for more than one session and to compare your photos. So I don't know how cost effective that would be for you. By the time you paid for your flight, your hotel, or your Airbnb, it probably wouldn't make much sense if you live in the US to travel overseas to get Lanluma. But if you live in the US and you've been thinking about getting Sculptra, you should come to my event that I'm planning on Thursday, September 21st.
I'm doing an open house Sculptra event in which you can save on getting Sculptra. It's a once-in-a-lifetime promo, so make sure you check out the description of this video for the details on the Sculptra promotion. And be sure to go to my website to subscribe to my secret promo email list so you can be alerted of any future promotions.
If you've tried Lanluma or Sculptra, comment below and let us know what you think. And if you've tried them both, even better. Do you feel one product worked better than the other? Don't forget to watch these videos next to learn more about the magic of collagen stimulators.